this question, how do you strengthen communication with school staff? I could just riff on that for 10 minutes for you and give you my thoughts. And by doing that, I would silence all of your thoughts. And so this Q&A and A&A is something that, to be clear, my intention for inviting you to actually muster up the effort to share and jump into conversation with each other is that maybe you have something in your brain that is actually going to be really useful to somebody else, and I couldn't possibly know it. And so I don't want to spend too much time pretending not to. Just a quick logistical call out. So when I started doing this work, I would meet 800 people, and then I'd walk off stage and I'd have all these questions that would get barraged at me. And so right around COVID times, I decided to be cool to my kid, or to try to be cool to my kids. Didn't work. To try to be cool to my kids and become a YouTuber. And so what I did, the format of the YouTube channel is every video that I posted, and there's over 500 videos on there. Every video that I've posted, the title of the video is nearly a verbatim question that a leader and educator has asked me in some context. And then the video is like my most concise, useful, practical, like what do I do with my hands next response. And so what I would love to do today is actually just live film a couple of tutorials. And so some will be your perspectives. I've got this throwable, Chris, right? Yeah. Chris, I got this throwable microphone that you can't break. I've kicked this thing 100 feet and you just can't break it. Ah! All right? So it's a throwable microphone. It won't actually amplify your sound, but it will get recorded. And so what I'd love to do is invite some of your perspectives. So you could be YouTube famous and your kids or grandkids could think you're cool. Maybe, I don't know. So that's one thing we'll be doing as we go. If you don't want to be on YouTube, then don't offer something. I hope that some of you offer something. I know you're just getting credits, but this would be much more interesting. So here's what I would love to do. This question, so I worked with Melissa, who helped organize all of this conference, worked with Melissa to come up with a couple questions ahead of time. So I've seeded on my iPad here a handful of questions. I don't know if we'll hit all, and we'll see where we go and do what y'all want to do, but we'll start with a couple to get some momentum going, and then quite likely, we'll have you create a time to generate your own questions for me. All right, so as we're going, thinking about, you just spent an hour with me. If you turn on the curiosity switch, you probably got some questions, and so feel free to come out with those questions when we get to that place. Cool? All right. So first of all, I'm not going to share any perspective on this at all. And so I'm just going to change the question to, how do you strengthen communication with school staff? So you get dropped into school, or you've been there for a long time and you know this person's family and you know way too much about the dynamics at the school or the district. How do you, specifically, you personally, strengthen communication with school staff? And for this, and I'm willing to have you hate me for 30 seconds for the greater good. I'm going to invite you to actually stand up and go sit somewhere else where you're not down next to some people who you have not talked to. All right? And go ahead and spend 3 to 4 minutes answering this question, and we'll toss that throwable mic around afterward, and then I'll share a couple thoughts with you. All right? How do you strengthen communication with school staff? Go for it. So this isn't my actual answer to this question. I'll give it after I hear some of your answers. But just hearing the decibel level in the room and what the exchange that just happened, really good facilitators. So this is a session entitled Smarter Facilitation and Connection Before Content. And so really good facilitators know that nobody cares unless they know you actually care. Right. You got it, right? Nobody actually cares unless they know you care. And ironically, one way to get people to care is to say, hey, your opinions are really valuable. Can you share them with me or each other and get some conversation happening first? So what I'd love to do is toss this out. I'll take volunteers first, but I also will just throw it. My invite is just sharing a way that you heard one of the people that you talked to, a strategy or an idea or a tip of how to strengthen communication with school staff. Yeah.
Say my name. Hi, I'm Tasha.
Hi, Tasha. We can say hi, Tasha, back.
Yes, I'll
Hi,
Tasha. Hi. Okay. Well, one thing that I stated consistency. Being consistent in whatever you say, doing what you say you're going to do, and being visible can strengthen communication and relationships. But one thing that my partner also said, that at the beginning of the year, going to staff and asking, is there something that I can do to be of assistance to you to help your job easier, or to something that I could do differently, kind of assessing maybe prior years, or, that was a helpful tip that she gave me that I thought that would be really a good way to break the ice when it comes to supporting and building relationships and communicating with staff.
Yeah, and can I affirm, so technically you're talking about connecting with staff. Technically I'm in the role of staff right now. Phil in the back is help welcome you in, invite you to get a card. There's the question of is there anything I can do to be helpful? And some people will have a really clear response to that. And then there's Phil, who comes up to me and says, I know what's going on. I'm a councilman in Louisville. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Louisville.
No. I know I said that right, but the town.
Louisville. Yeah.
Thank you. So Phil comes up to me and said, Councilman, I do a lot of speaking. Do you want water? My answer was, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, right? So there's the nuance of one of my favorite quotes is this idea that specificity is the soul of narrative. So getting really specific is the soul of a good story. And so I think the idea, that story wouldn't be quite as interesting if Phil came up and asked me a more general question. It was the specificity that was actually really useful in that moment. So can I give you any help? And then can I do anything to help you today? And then can I do anything to help with picking up or cleaning your classroom? And then can I help Bobby? I know it's been really intense in the last couple of days with him. Right? Do you see that funnel of specificity going in? So you want to ask really good questions, sometimes drawing them in to make them more specific. Beautiful. Okay, other ideas. If you just whip it. Coffee, water, yeah. It's unbreakable, fear not.
I'm Amanda. Hi, Amanda. Hi. So I'll start kind of what she did. One of the things that we personally do is we are present in staff events that we don't necessarily have to be at, but we choose to be at so that they're reminded that we are there, we're available, and we want them to remember that we're an open source of communication, that our door is open not just for students, but for staff as well. So we find that in attending those staff meetings and those events, that it just kind of puts our face back out there. And a lot of times people will come up to us and say, I've kind of noticed that so-and-so. And it's just a good way for us to communicate. And again, it's not that we have to be there, it's that we want to be there. So that is kind of something that we've been doing. But one of the things my partner mentioned was that she makes an effort to develop a relationship with more support staff. Not only does she go to the teachers, but she'll go to the custodial staff and the school cooks and staff like that may not be your first thought, but they have that more personal relationship with the student. And so they may know something that we don't, or the teacher doesn't know. And I thought that was a phenomenal idea because she's really utilizing extra staff to make that connection. And I thought that was beautiful.
Brilliant, super brilliant. So Q and AAA, we got AA, one more. Oh, in the back. Let's hear from Phil. We called out Phil. Phil. Woo!
One of the things we talked about was, and I'm summarizing it, but sometimes as Frisky, we are reserved about disrupting the flow of information. So being able to just go up and sending out information to teachers and staff And also setting the expectation early. You know, sometimes I think we say, well, we got to wait to get to the principal or this person to disseminate that flow of information out. And so just removing that, I guess, that mental barrier and just doing it and doing it from day one until it's addressed, and then you, I guess, veer from that. But a lot of times it's just our own disruption of, we're going to disrupt the flow of information in the school just by communicating to staff.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like if your goal is to make a difference, in what reality does anybody want to make the path longer to making a difference? I recognize there's all sorts of like requirements and rules and regulations and like things, but also like in theory, I think most human beings are like, we want the shortest, best path for you to make a difference. And so being able to disrupt that, really brilliant. Let me give you my answer, my 2 cents, and then we'll switch up questions. I'm thinking we maybe do 3 of the questions that I've got stocked, and then we take a minute to think about like, what questions do you actually want to ask and discuss here? What do you actually want to talk about? So in other words, start brewing up, turning on your curiosity and brewing up what that is. So for me, it's the idea of connecting before content. And I did not just think like, oh, this sounds good, I'm going to share it with a group. It's also like, before I unpack what I'm about to, it's a little bit preaching to the choir, because you know this already. This is obvious. What's not obvious is, I think sometimes we mistake connection before content as like chop up some small talk with people before we meet with them. And not that that's bad, but you do not have time. Like small talk builds trust over years. You've got 5 minutes with a kid on Tuesday. And so the idea for me, connection before content, to actually be put in the category of connection before content, it's got to have these 3 ingredients. It's got to connect to, first of all, and this is like seems a little bit obvious, but this is particularly relevant for any groups that you're facilitating. So while some of the stuff we're talking about is really relevant for one-on-one interactions, like thinking about the groups that you are responsible for gathering or that you might in the future gather, your question activity, whatever it is when people come in to connect before content, must connect people to each other. This seems obvious, but how many times have you walked into a session, and maybe even in the next hour, you might walk into a session, and the person up here might do all sorts of effort to build rapport and build a relationship of trust out here, and be like, I know you're just here for the credits, but like, oh, can you just have fun? Like all the stuff that I just did a few minutes ago. And that's fine, right? But also, this idea of connection before content is like the actual rapport and the warmth in the room is built when you get people to turn their heads away from you and toward each other. So whatever that group is. And so I think about a group of middle school girls walking into a Girls on the Run thing, wondering like, will I fit in? Is this for me? Etc. And so a really phenomenal facilitator and leader assumes the social risk for people to make easy connections, or to make connection easy. And so by inviting people, by me saying, like, this is a bit of a lift, like you're tired, kind of toward the middle of the day, I don't know how much you've all eaten, and so it's a little bit of a lift for me to start a session by saying, grab a card, come in, talk about how it relates to your work or not, so on and so forth. And so, and yet I know that the value, and there's some really cool research behind this. There's one of my favorite books is by a woman named Priya Parker, and it's called The Art of Gathering. And she talks about this idea, so many good little nuggets in there. One of them is like meet for purpose rather than for time. It's like, how often have you been in a meeting and you're like, what is this meeting about again? And why was I invited to be here? Right? It's like, so meet for purpose, not for time. That's a kind of cool idea. But one of her pieces of research was when you ask people to use their larynx, their voice box, in the first 5% of a gathering, they are vastly more likely to use it in the rest of the 95%. And so if you've ever facilitated any sort of conversation or a group, and you would love to have people raising their hand and saying, yeah, I'll take the catch box, or the throwable microphone, right? If you would love to have people raising their hands, you actually can increase the chances that people raise their hands literally or metaphorically by inviting them to use their larynx in the first 5% of a gathering. And so as you're planning, as you're designing, like that's a golden nugget, because it prevents you from being a dentist later on. I didn't go to school to be a dentist. I got no interest in being a dentist, right? Okay, second one, and this is the thing that most like icebreakers miss. I'm on a mission to just gently eradicate the word icebreaker from the world's lexicon, because some people hate them and a couple people love them. And so the idea of connection before content drops it down to a layer of intention where it's also connecting people to the purpose of why they are there. So it's like my time, assuming that the people that you're with, like their time is really valuable. And so what is the purpose? And so as I have you walk in, are you all like encouraging each other? You're just playing guess and fill in the blanks in the back. When I had you walk in and choose an image or a quote and share how that related or did not relate to your work, my intention that was absolutely connected to the purpose of why you're here overall. In addition to CEU credits, right, you're here hopefully to take home a new perspective that makes your life and some students' lives a bit better. And so a random quote and a random image, and imagine that, is like just stretching the dimension of your thinking on this one line. Like maybe it was really useful to you and you want to keep the card and you're free to, and maybe you're like, whatever, we chatted instead of it being quiet in the beginning. Right? Either way, that was this idea of connection before content. And then the last one is this idea that we got to create space or choice for authenticity and vulnerability. And this is just like big academic-y language for, can people show up and just be themselves? Or do they feel like they have to put on some sort of a mask and be some kind of way with you in that moment? And so any question, exercise, thing that you do that helps make that happen, I would say will help strengthen communication with school staff and with parents and with students. I'd say what Kate did, when I shared in the keynote earlier, what Kate did with Mikey was absolutely connection before content. They got to connect with each other. The purpose of why they were there was to get well. It wasn't just to take an Adderall. The purpose was actually to get well. I mean, in theory, we have a whole separate discussion about Adderall, but right, the purpose was to get well. And so she saw, I know that for you, being seen, heard, and understood might make you a little bit more well. And so it connected to the purpose, and it totally created the option and choice for authenticity and vulnerability. Whew. All right. Anybody have any other perspective, golden gems to add to that before we shift gears? Useful to just have like a couple distinguishing factors. I'll share one more concept here, which is I like bananas. Bananas are good. I like to eat them. They taste good, got potassium. I've gotten organic bananas at the grocery store, and I've also got not organic, meaning genetically modified bananas. And I'll tell you what, the organic bananas rot a lot faster. They don't last as long. And I think this idea of connection before content is like, it disrupts the norm sometimes. So like when you're hosting a gathering, you are taking on the social risk of modifying what usually happens. So you walk into a teacher's classroom, or you've got a group of staff that you're gathered with, and you're sharing a little bit about how you hope to help and support them. It would 100% be a social risk to say, hey, nothing we talk about in the next 10 minutes matters, unless it's actually connected to like what is really important to you right now. And so really quick, can you just chat with one other teacher here and just answer what's really important to you? And then I would love to just hear that real quick. Do you get that? Like that's probably not your default way, but I'm inviting you to like take on the role of facilitator in that moment. Okay, I talk fast. And sometimes there's people who process things in just like some quiet and some reflection. And so I want to leave just a solid minute of pure quiet for you to just write down any notes. It could be a question that you have for me for later. It could be some little concept that you want to jot down. Maybe you want to scribble down this, but just a minute to actually reflect. And my facilitator language for this is creating productive silence. You know, there's like the uncomfortable crickets and you're a dentist pulling teeth. And then there's, everybody take 10 seconds, think of your own response, and then I'm going to invite you to popcorn out multiple responses. It's like, that's really productive silence. The brain's like that. It's useful. So 30 seconds to a minute, just silence. Do whatever you need to do in that silence other than talk.